Hi, VencoreWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Thursday, April 30th. Probably the biggest story in terms of the weather here in the Mid-Atlantic region for the next several days is that we'll have a big warm-up next week. It looks like we'll have a preview of summer next week with high temperatures in the 80s in many I-95 corridor locations at some point during the week, perhaps as early as Monday afternoon in many parts of the I-95 corridor. And if not early in the week, later in the week, it looks like another surge of warm air here into the Mid-Atlantic region as we turn into the month of May, and indeed it becomes a much warmer weather pattern beginning the early part of next week. We have a couple of cool and damp days to go through as we close out this work week. Excuse me, a storm organizes off the Mid-Atlantic coastline, and even though that storm stays well off the coastline with most of its rainfall off the coastline, a stiff northeast breeze will develop in the low levels of the atmosphere and bring much cooler air into the region for today and especially on Friday as we close out the work week. Let's jump ahead a little bit. Here's the 500 millibar height anomaly forecast map for about Tuesday morning of next week from the last night's 0Z GFS ensemble run. This from the Penn State E-ball site. Just notice the big ridge developing here in the Mid-Atlantic region. This is kind of contrary to the pattern we've had over the past several weeks and indeed right through the winter where we had a deep trough in the northeastern part of the country. Well, by about Tuesday of next week, we'll have an upper level ridge and temperatures should jump, especially on Monday and Tuesday, perhaps into the 80s in many parts of the I-95 corridor. Well, here's the current surface map, kind of a mishmash here of low pressure areas depicted here by NOAA in the Mid-Atlantic region. Really the main low pressure system to watch is this one off the southeastern coastline. This is the one that will intensify and move offshore, but it'll be strong enough to promote a northeast flow of low-level air into the I-95 corridor. In fact, winds have already turned out to be out of the northeast in many parts of the I-95 corridor. And certainly by this afternoon, there will be a persistent flow out of the northeast, pushing in cooler air off the ocean. The ocean is still very cool this time of the year, and temperatures will be cooler today compared to yesterday and noticeably cooler on Friday, where high temperatures tomorrow could struggle in some I-95 corridor locations to pass the 60-degree mark. Well, in fact, let's take a look here and see that the northeast flow has developed here. Notice these wind barbs here, northeast flow already starting to form either out of the northeast or the north, all the way up to eastern New England right here, out of the northeast, as low pressure intensifies later today off the coastline in this region right in here. This northeast flow will also intensify, and we'll have steady northeast winds from this afternoon through tomorrow night in the I-95 corridor. Ocean still quite chilly this time of year. Basically, water temperatures in the low 50s right now, and this will all promote cooler conditions this afternoon, especially on Friday, with high temperatures tomorrow struggling to pass the 60-degree mark in Philly and New York City, perhaps into the low 60s only in D.C. Then much warmer conditions develop over the weekend and really intensify by the early part of next week, with the 80s possible by Monday afternoon. Well, how about rainfall from this organizing Mid-Atlantic coastal storm here? Certainly in the I-95 corridor between D.C., Philadelphia, and New York City, the best area for rainfall appears to be Washington, D.C. area. In fact, Philly and New York City may end up with very little over the next 36 hours or so. Certainly can be a shower or a touch of drizzle at any time from this afternoon through tonight, through the day tomorrow, and even into tomorrow night in Philly and New York City, but certainly not a heavy rain event by any means. It'll be damp and certainly cooler with that low-level northeast flow of air, but most of the precipitation associated with this developing coastal storm will stay in the D.C. area and points to the south and east. They certainly can have and should have occasional showers in the Washington, D.C. area this afternoon through tomorrow. Again, most of the precipitation over the next 36 hours or so will stay south of the Pennsylvania-Maryland border, but all areas up and down the I-95 corridor will get damp and certainly cooler with a low-level flow of east to northeast winds starting this afternoon and continuing through tomorrow night. Well, let's take a look at a couple of computer forecast maps for the upcoming coastal storm situation. This is from last night's Zero-Z GFS Global Forecast System computer forecast model that's put out by NOAA. This is the forecast map for this evening, Thursday evening. The center of the low pressure is well off the mid-Atlantic coastline, but again, it'll have an influence in terms of a low-level east to northeast flow of air that'll produce some damp and cool conditions. Ocean temperatures still way down in the low 50s just off of the Jersey coastline, so any kind of an ocean flow will promote some cooling here, especially compared to yesterday when we had an offshore flow. And this weekend, once that northeast flow ends, we'll warm up abruptly. And certainly by Monday, it looks like we'll get downright warm with the 80s possible in the I-95 corridor Monday and Tuesday of next week. And if you don't reach 80 on Monday or Tuesday, you have another shot later in the week, as there'll be another surge of warm air into the I-95 corridor. Notice most of the precipitation hanging across central Pennsylvania or south of the Mason-Dixon line. Again, not much at all expected over the next 36 hours in Philly and New York City. A touch of drizzle or a shower or two is possible at just about any time, but again, not at all a heavy rain event. Down in D.C., some decent shower activity is expected this afternoon, tonight, tomorrow, into the early part of tomorrow night. Here's the forecast map for tomorrow morning, Friday morning. That low pressure area well off the mid-Atlantic coastline, but notice here, the isobars indicating a northeast flow of air still on the northwest quadrant of this low pressure area, and again, that'll push in some cooler, damp air off the ocean. Most of the heavier precipitation south of the Mason-Dixon line across D.C. Some decent shower activity in the D.C. metro region over the next 36 hours, but little precipitation expected in Philly and New York City. Finally, here's the forecast map for tomorrow night. Notice this low kind of wraps around and stalls out off the mid-Atlantic coastline. We'll be kind of in a dry slot in terms of precipitation, but still a light northeast flow of air should continue into tomorrow night, Friday night. And then notice just some weak high pressure filling in behind it. Saturday looks like a much milder day with improving conditions. However, given a weak high pressure area and still some residual moisture in the atmosphere, certainly can be a shower or two up and down the I-95 corridor Saturday afternoon into Saturday evening. Sunday looks like an even better day with probably no rainfall at all in the I-95 corridor and temperatures jumping into the 70s. And then the warm air pushes in on Monday and Tuesday with 80 degrees possible in most I-95 corridors by Monday afternoon and again on Tuesday. That's it for now. For VencoreWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.